and always to you are King. Bless and let there be love in our home, the marriage experience ordained by you alone. The marriage experience. The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Welcome to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos, where they explore what it means to cultivate a God-centric marriage by delivering realistic and biblical wisdom, pointers, and insights from couples and individuals on the marriage journey. Join them today as they share some insights. Enjoy.
Good evening, Marriage Experience family, and an exceptionally warm welcome to today's episode. We're always glad you're joining us, ready for a time of real couples, real conversations, and real life. How did we come to that, though?
Yeah, well, actually, like our excitement, we really are excited to have you with us tonight. Now, whether you're here intentionally or you just happen to land on this stream while surfing and looking for what station to listen to, we are really happy to have you here with us. Here, we don't believe in coincidences because this might just be the encouragement that you need today.
And if this is your very first time joining the Marriage Experience, welcome. It is an experience indeed. And so, as we always say, pull up your chair, settle in, open your heart, and let's dive into today's conversation. It just might shift the way you understand yourself and also show up for your spouse and family this week.
So true. We're passionate about marriage and see it as one of God's most incredible gifts. But we also know that when you hear about happily ever afters, they're not automatic. We build with intentionality, we build with patience, and hearts that stay in line with God's heart.
Absolutely. Our heart is to give you a foundation that's rooted in Scripture, coupled with practical tools that you can actually use. And we keep it honest and real, yet always leaving room for grace, because you know what? We are all work in progress and we're learning how to love better. So stay with us and we'll continue right after the break.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So we spent time looking at how couples connect, how they communicate, how they understand each other, and how those everyday moments shape the feel of a relationship. And for many people, that brings clarity around how marriage works relationally. You know, we're talking here about the rhythms, the patterns, and the way two lives move together over time. But then there's something else that quietly happens in marriage, which is not
Is there
just
ever anything else?
exactly just how you relate with each other, but how you start to experience yourselves within the relationship.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's that subtle realization that they don't feel entirely like they used to, and many times it's difficult to place a finger on it.
Absolutely. And, I think that one of the quieter things that can happen in marriage is that you don't always notice how much you're gradually changing through seasons, responsibilities, through simply building a life together. And then one day you catch yourself and you realize you don't quite feel like the version of yourself that you remember. And what makes that interesting is that it's not something that's negative or intentional. It's not that you've lost yourself completely or that something has gone wrong.
Has gone wrong, yeah.
It's more that life together naturally shapes you. We have that saying in Yoruba that says that, traditionally soap makers would wrap soap inside leaves. And the saying goes that the longer the soap stays inside the leaf becomes soap itself. So it's that subtle shift and that subtle changing of who you are as a result of the pace of life, the decisions, the shared responsibilities. They all begin to influence how you think, how you respond, even how you see yourself.
That's interesting you say that, even how you see yourself. So, when you're going into marriage, like we often talk about this with the couples that we have on the programs we run with them, that you've got two people with different backgrounds, different lives, coming together to form something entirely new,
brand new,
that has never existed before. And I think that can be quite a surprising realization for most people, because you don't enter marriage expecting yourself to be to shift in that way. What you expect is growth, yes, but not necessarily that subtle sense of, hey, I feel a little bit different to how I used to feel. And it's often not so easy to explain. It's very difficult at times, as a matter of fact, to put in words, because everything externally might look stable. The relationship is fine, life is functioning, but then internally, something has quietly shifted, something has quietly moved. And sometimes that realization,
that sense of self, isn't it?
True, that sense of not just a shift in one's understanding, but shift in one's identity.
Yes. How one sees oneself.
True, and sometimes that realization comes in very ordinary moments. You might be making a decision and then realize your instinct is different now than it used to be.
And I guess it's also part of seasons of life too, right?
And in that difference, you might also respond to something and then notice, hey, I wouldn't have responded like that a few years ago. Who am I? Who have I become? Now, this isn't necessarily better or worse. It's just different. But it raises a question of identity. Who am I becoming in this marriage?
And that's quite an important question, because it doesn't come from dissatisfaction. It just comes from awareness. And it's just you noticing who you're evolving into, and it's
you're not necessarily rejecting this. It's just a new picture.
Absolutely. And your the life that you had built before, or the life that you had known before, you are now noticing the way that life has shaped you. And for many people, it's not something they were ever taught to expect in marriage. No one.
That's true.
I mean, there's that saying, even when growing up, that somebody would tell you that, it appears like even your parents look alike. I don't know what happens there, but that kind of a thing starts to happen. And we begin to think of marriage as something, or rather not begin to, but there's that
tendency.
That's tendency, and to think of marriage as something that we enter fully formed into, and rather than something that continues to shape us over time.
I like that. It continues to shape us over time. And I think that shaping actually never ends, because you're going through life together, and life situations change. So you have to change, not just as individuals, but even as a couple, because life itself is changing.
Absolutely.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So that shaping over time is actually not accidental. It comes from very real things that we experience.
Like you were saying.
Shared decisions, emotional responsibilities, or even adapting to each other and responding to the seasons of life, like we talked about earlier on. Now, even the way you support each other or carry different parts of life can slowly influence how you operate as a person. So without realizing it, you begin to adjust, not just in behavior, but in internal posture. Who am I? And the interesting thing is that these changes are often so gradual. Not that you don't notice them happening in real time. It's only when you look back, maybe over a year or two or more, you then begin to realize that you actually think differently. You respond differently, even feel differently about certain things. And again, that does not mean everything or if something has gone wrong. It just simply means something has evolved from within.
It just means that life has happened.
Life has happened.
And you're now adapting to life.
True.
Right? And we can say that this is where it can get a bit complex emotionally for people, because we don't always have language for that kind of a change. And some people it can actually freak them out that it's as if they're losing themselves. But it's not necessarily, like you said before, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a way that we now need to re-understand ourselves, if I can use that. So instead of recognizing it as development, some people might interpret it as distance from who they used to be. But those two things aren't always the same. Sometimes it's just growth we haven't fully acknowledged yet. And that distinction is really important, because losing yourself and becoming someone slightly new. Because in marriage, those two can feel similar at times if you're not paying attention. But one is rooted in absence and the other is rooted in change. And how you interpret that makes a difference to how you respond to it.
Yeah, I like just thinking about that. One of them is rooted in absence, which means there's like a fade of one's identity, and the other is rooted in change, because there's a need. There's
evolving with life as you're living it.
And maybe that's part of what we want to gently explore in this conversation. Not to rush to fix anything, but to become more aware.
And which is more often than not what we bring to the table. That sense of or that need to be aware of one another, or aware of yourself,
one's identity,
sort of in the emotional intelligent aspect of marriage.
Yeah, and that emotional intelligence, that identity, all these things shift, and they shift naturally over time within marriage, because once you start to see it clearly, it becomes less confusing and more understandable. Perhaps maybe even more than that, it opens up a different kind of conversation between couples about how they are experiencing themselves in this season of life. But that's not always something people think to ask. But it can be quite revealing when they take the time to ask that question.
Absolutely, because sometimes the most important conversations aren't about what's happening between you, but about what's happening within you while you're together. And recognizing that can bring a different level of honesty and understanding into the relationship. So maybe the starting point for today is simply not to judge the change, not to resist it, but to notice it. To become aware that identity in marriage is not fixed. It's something that continues to unfold as life unfolds. And once you see it that way, it becomes less about trying to get back to who you were, or your spouse getting confused about who you are becoming, because that's another aspect of it. But that both of you now are more understanding of who you are each becoming. So it's because it's two sides of the same coin.
That's as you're saying that, I just remembered visiting our hometown, where we both grew up. We've been away for probably about 20 years or something. So the way life is, when you live, you have that snapshot, that fixed memory. And though you might try to extrapolate and imagine how things would have progressed, you have no clue whatsoever what this new place is. Now, so I visited there. Yes, I knew where the major roads were. I could never get lost, but it was a completely different place. I felt like fish out of water. And it's not because... Look,
and this was where you lived the almost 30 years, the first 30 years of your life.
And it just shows that life just continues to evolve. Life continues to change, and we must always have be prepared to change and make changes to the way we do things. The way, of course, there must be fundamental things in life. Of course, I mean, you don't change those fundamental basic principles that you have, but it's probably more of the way things are done that have to change.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So, if we accept that identity in marriage doesn't shift over time, then we find ourselves in a situation where we just get confused because guess what? Identity in marriage does indeed shift over time. And the next question is probably why it happens so quietly, because most people don't wake up one day and feel completely different. It's not like it's not like a switch that it's off now, then comes on, the next day. It's rarely that obvious. It tends to be more gradual than that. And that gradual nature is exactly why it's very easy to miss, because it's not something, it's just like the way our eyes work. When I'm just thinking of all these nature programs we watch. I watch the stealth movement of lions or cheetahs or whatever they are. They move very slowly, and that's because the eyes and the brain, don't process subtle changes. We don't notice those changes, and that's why the animals creep very, very slowly, of course, until they're within striking distance and then attack. And it's the same thing here. When you have that subtle change, we don't notice. We don't notice. It doesn't arrive in one big moment that forces attention. It happens in layers, in routines. Remember, a routine is something you do every day, which means there's nothing that changes. In shared decisions, or in perhaps adapting to each other's needs, or even everyday process of building a life together. Each moment on its own feels small, but then over time, they begin to accumulate.
And that accumulation is really the key here, because you don't feel the shift when it's happening. You're just responding to what's in front of you. You're making decisions, not like normal every day. You're solving problems. You're adjusting to the seasons of life. And in doing that consistently, something internal begins to adjust, as well as a natural response to what life is demanding of you. And a big part of that is responsibility. Marriage brings shared responsibility, emotional, practical, relational, and how you carry those responsibilities can slowly shape how you see yourself. You might begin to identify more with what you manage, what you hold, what you're responsible for, instead of just who you are outside of those roles. And, I think you were saying it several episodes ago that, it's like when someone asks, who are you? You tend to define yourself by these roles, as opposed to your being, as opposed to
you tend to define yourself by what you've achieved, what I can do, what I can produce,
rather than who I am.
And that's really important, because it shows how identity isn't just something internal or fixed. It's also responsive to environment, the roles you step into repeatedly, the patterns you maintain, even the ways you support each other. All these things begin to shape your internal sense of self without you consciously deciding to actually do the shaping. Another layer is simply adaptation. In any close relationship, you naturally begin to adjust to the other person, not necessarily in a negative way, but in a way that creates harmony, in a way that creates flow, in a way that creates synergy. And you learn each other's heartbeats, your preferences, your responses. And then over time, that adaptation becomes part of how you operate as an individual within that relationship.
Absolutely. That adaptation, it can be so subtle that it doesn't feel like change at all. And it just feels like being considerate or being practical or being supportive, like you just mentioned. But when you look back over time, you realize those small changes have contributed to a slightly different version of yourself. Not lost, but shaped. You used that word there, synergy, and it's the creating of that synergy that actually keeps the home, that brings the peace and the joy, or for whatever. And what makes this adaptation we're talking about, what makes it even more interesting is that life seasons also play a role. And there are periods where the focus is very external. We're talking about children, work, finance, transitions. And in those seasons, your attention is often directed outward. So your internal reflection naturally becomes less frequent, not because it's unimportant, but because there's so much happening externally.
Oh, yeah. And in those seasons, you're often just getting to what really needs to be done. So the question of how am I changing internally doesn't always get space to surface. It's not that it disappears, it's just quieter. And when things slow down again, you suddenly become more aware of what's been shifting in the background, which is often when people notice it most, not during the change itself, but in the pause after that change. When life gives a bit more space, you start to reflect, and you start to realize that your responses, your priorities, even your emotional patterns may have shifted more than you initially thought.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
Now, back to our focus for today, the identity shift in marriage. The people we were when we first said I do aren't exactly the same people we are years later.
Yes, we've talked about that. And that can feel uncomfortable sometimes. We often expect marriage to preserve a moment in time.
A snapshot
but
of our lives.
God designed marriage to grow in us, to grow through us. Through different seasons, through joys, through disappointments, through healing and maturity. He continues shaping both husband and wife.
And the beautiful part of that is that healthy marriages aren't built by resisting those changes. They're strengthened when couples choose to rediscover each other again and again with grace, with patience, and with faith.
Exactly. Ecclesiastes reminds us that there's a season for everything, and relationships are no different at all. Some seasons feel light, others feel joyful, others feel stretching and refining. But every season has the potential to deepen love if we allow God to work through it.
So the song we'll be sharing shortly captures that journey so beautifully. It's a reminder that growth isn't something to fear, and that even in seasons where things feel unfamiliar, God is still planting, pruning, and renewing.
So here's I Will Be Here by Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Tomorrow morning, if you wake up and the sun does not appear, I will be here. If in the dark we lose sight of love, hold my hand and have no fear, 'cause I will be here. I will be here when you feel like being quiet, when you need to speak your mind. I will listen, and I will be here when the laughter turns to crying, through the winning, losing, and try, we'll be together, 'cause I will be here. Tomorrow morning if you wake up and the future is unclear, I will be here. Just as sure as the seasons were made for change, our lifetimes were made for these years. So I will be here. And I will be here so you can cry on my shoulder when the mirror tells us we're older. I will hold you, and I will be here to watch you grow in beauty and tell you all the things you mean to me. I will be here. Oh, I will be true to the promise I have made to you and to the one who gave you to me. Oh, I will be here. And just as sure as the seasons were made for change, our lifetimes were made for these years. So I will be here, we'll be together. Oh yes we will, 'cause I will be here. I will be here.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
Now, it's important to state that none of these changes are accidental or necessarily negative. They're actually a very normal part of shared life. But because we don't always talk about identity as something that evolves in marriage, it can sometimes feel surprising when we notice it. When something feels surprising, it can easily be misinterpreted. Instead of seeing it as development, people might wonder if they've drifted or if something has been lost. But in many cases, it's simply the natural outcome of living closely with someone over time. You influence each other and you are influenced in return.
And that influence is often very quiet. It's in how you think through decisions. Decisions you take now compared to what decisions you took before. And it's in what you prioritize without even realizing it. It's in the way your emotional responses have been shaped by shared experience. And all of that contributes to a sense of identity that is still yours, but slightly different in the way it's being expressed. And, that's a helpful way to frame it. Not as a loss of oneself, as we've said several times, but as an evolution of self within that relationship. Because when you see it that way, it becomes less about trying to recover who you were. Like we said earlier on, it's less about how trying to rebuild the time where I grew up the way I remembered it, but it's more about understanding who we are now and in that particular season of life.
And that's very important, that that understanding, can actually bring a lot of peace, because instead of resisting change or feeling unsettled by it, you begin to approach it with awareness. You recognize that identity is not fixed at a single point in time. It's just like expecting yourself to be the same version of yourself when you were 5 and when you were 20. You're going to evolve, absolutely. And you recognize that your identity unfolds just as life unfolds. And the real shift is not trying to stop the change or over explain it, but to simply learn to notice it with a bit more clarity and grace. And one of the tensions that can quietly emerge in marriage is that growth does not always happen in ways we immediately recognize, either in ourselves or in each other.
Yeah.
And someone can be changing gradually, becoming more reflective, more responsible, more resilient, and yet still feel slightly unfamiliar to themselves at times.
Yeah, true. Because growth sometimes happens underneath everyday life. I would actually even say it probably always happens under everyday life. And when that change happens slowly, recognition tends to lag behind it. You've already changed internally before you're fully caught up with that change emotionally. And I think that can create an unusual experience where you're functioning normally. Life is moving forward, the relationship is steady, but then internally, you're still adjusting to the person you're becoming. At times, maybe not even accepting that the person that you've become during that season. And at that same time, your spouse is also relating to that evolving version of you. This now means that marriage is not just two fixed people learning each other once. It's two people continually learning each other across different seasons of growth, and two people continually learning about themselves during those seasons as well.
Tell me about it. I mean, we celebrated our 33rd anniversary last week. And I mean, there are times I'm thinking, this man, this isn't the same person I married. Not in a bad way, in a good way.
Better not be.
In a good way, because he's evolving to a more godlike person, if I may say, in terms of how he expresses love, how he shows up within the marriage, and it's a joy to experience and to behold each of us becoming this better version of ourselves. And I guess it's because experiences have shaped us as well. Experiences not just within the marriage, but in life in general. And that's such an important perspective that we need to look at, because it removes an expectation that everything should stay emotionally familiar at all times. And some seasons will feel very recognizable and settled, while others feel more transitional internally. And these transitional seasons can feel unsettling simply because they're unfamiliar, and growth often changes your priorities, your energy, your perspective, even the way that you experience life. Sometimes even your spouse will notice those shifts before you do. They may sense that you're carrying yourself differently, thinking differently, responding differently. I've told him several times that, you did that differently. It's like, really? Yeah. Because I've experienced him do the same thing or similar thing in a certain way, and I'm experiencing him doing it in a completely different way. And you may still be trying to understand that shift yourself.
And I think that's where grace becomes important, because if we expect each other to remain emotionally identical through every season of life, we want to have our spouses defined so we know exactly who they are. We leave
maybe that's a robot you're married to.
So we leave very little room for healthy development, and that's the key word: development. Marriage isn't static. People continue to unfold within marriage, and that unfolding doesn't have to create distance. In fact, when it's approached with openness, it can actually deepen the relationship because you're continuing to discover each other rather than assuming you already fully know each other. And you really cannot fully know anyone because life itself changes, which means it reshapes everyone. And I think that keeps marriage alive in a very healthy way. There's still curiosity, still attentiveness, still awareness that the person beside you is growing and the person beside you is evolving. Guess what? Just as you are as well.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So maybe part of maturity in marriage is actually accepting that growth will sometimes feel unfamiliar before it feels comfortable. And learning not to panic in those moments, but to stay present long enough to understand what's actually changing. And once you recognize that change is a normal part of marriage, the focus shifts from trying to avoid it to learning how to stay grounded whilst it's happening. Growth feels much healthier when there's still a sense of internal stability beneath it. And stability often comes from remaining connected to the core parts of who you are. Like you said before, your values, your convictions, and things that give your life direction beyond any particular season. And those things help you adapt without feeling emotionally lost.
Yes, it's important not to end up feeling emotionally lost. That is really important because marriage is meant to shape you, but it's not meant to erase you. Healthy growth should deepen your sense of self, not disconnect you from it. I also think there's value in making space to check in with yourself honestly from time to time, not in an overly serious or structured way, but simply just asking a few questions like, how am I doing this season? What feels different? What feels stretched? What still feels true about me? Awareness creates steadiness. When you recognize what's changing, it becomes easier to move from those, move through those changes intentionally rather than feeling carried by them unconsciously, as in being, the picture I have in mind is being pushed down the hill by a flood. You don't want to have that.
And awareness also helps couples support each other better. Instead of assuming your spouse is exactly the same as they were a few years ago, you remain open to who they are becoming now, especially with women now, with the conversations around menopause. Men really need to get in the flow of that and to get to understand how their wives will change when they get to this stage of life. And that openness would keep your relationship from becoming rigid. It allows room for growth without making change feel threatening. And another thing that just came to my mind also is women who suffer postpartum, whether depression or whatever, it's important for men to understand that change. I know we're not talking about those hormonal changes, but those hormonal changes also affect who the woman is becoming. And we also need to know that when one person, when one person is going through these changes, the understanding and the support of their spouse is very, very important. And maybe one of the quietest strengths of a healthier marriage is when two people continue to grow while still remaining rooted enough to also grow together.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So today we've been exploring something that often happens very quietly in marriage, and that's the reality that shared life gradually shapes who we are becoming. We talked about how those changes usually happen slowly through responsibility, adaptation, and the pace of everyday life, and how growth can sometimes feel unfamiliar before we fully recognize what's going on. But we also reflected on the importance of staying grounded through these seasons. And we do that by remaining aware of ourselves while continuing to make space for each other to grow.
Absolutely. It's been a very eye-opening conversation, and some things that I hadn't really thought of, especially when it comes to the person evolving. I was almost going to say evolution before we go into a different conversation there, but how we evolve within the marriage. So we do hope that you have been blessed, and it's given you food for thought in understanding yourselves better as a couple, especially as you're advancing in years of being married. So let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for the ways you continue to shape us through every season of life. We ask, Lord, that you help us not to fear growth or change, but to move through it with wisdom, with stability and grace. Father, teach us to remain grounded in who you are calling us to be, while also remaining open to how marriage continues to refine us over time. We ask that you give couples patience with each other and with themselves, and help them to recognize growth without losing connection, and bring understanding where seasons feel unfamiliar. May our marriages become places where both people can continue to grow faithfully, honestly, and securely. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And as you move through this week, may you have grace for the changes that come with growth. May you have wisdom to recognize who you are becoming, while continuing to grow together with steadiness and peace.
Absolutely. So, as we always say, keep talking, keep praying, and keep inviting God into the center of it all. And may your relationship be marked by ease, not complacency, not pressure, because sometimes it's the simplest moments that keep you closest.
So you've been listening to The Marriage Experience on Heartsong Live Radio, which is Scotland's first Christian station on DAB Digital.
We're here live on Mondays with a replay on Wednesdays if you missed us.
And tonight, if tonight's a Monday night, don't move. Arise in the Lord is coming up at 11 p.m.
And on Wednesdays, we have What's on Your Plate with Annette. This is a great lifestyle show that celebrates everyday heroes in their communities.
And if Heartsong Live has blessed you, do consider supporting the station at heartsonglive.co.uk/donate.
Also, email us at mexperience@lidiosantos, that's LYDIOSANTOS.com. And you'll find us on YouTube at our YouTube channel. That's at Marriage Experience.
Without the E.
That's Experience without the E. In the front. At the front, rather. And hit like and subscribe and turn on the notification so that you will be the first to know when a new episode drops. Also, download the HSL app for easy, up-to-date access to ours and other uplifting programs.
So that's today's Marriage Experience. Do see you next week. Stay encouraged, and remember, God is already there. Do have a blessed week.
Thank you.
Join Ayakule and Bosade again next week on the Marriage Experience program as they bring God's truth to help you build your marriage God's way. Till then, remember, marriage is God's idea, and it is a good thing.